Look at all this pumpkin. The Seminole pumpkins have outdone themselves this year. And today I'm going to preserve them by canning. So come along with me in the kitchen and let's can some pumpkins.
All I have needs I have not provided.
Well, here's everything. Of course, I'm starting with pumpkins. I have a cutting board and a knife. A good knife that has the blade all the way through, because I'm also going to be using a hammer. I'm just really afraid of a knife slipping and then causing a serious injury. So I use a knife. I'll show you how I do that. I'm going to be scraping the insides out with a grapefruit spoon. Now I know if you didn't grow up in Florida way back in years past like I did, you probably don't have a grapefruit spoon. Any spoon that's really sturdy will work. I have all my canning supplies. I've got my rings, my lids, my jars have been washed, and I've got a funnel and the jar lifter. Now, a little word about the lids. If you've watched me do any of my other preserving videos, you know that I'm not opposed to reusing the lids. What you got to be careful about is the white is still intact, the rubber is still intact, and it's no missing pieces, no rust or no spots or showing through to the metal on the inside. Lids really aren't that expensive. I just like to reuse things when I can. This is the brand that I recommend. There's also Kerr, K-E-R-R. I have had bad experience using the ones from Walmart. You can try them, but what they do is, my experience, they sealed and then they didn't keep their seal. And I didn't find out because I put them away in the cupboards and then the food inside spoiled. So I stick with ball. I started harvesting the pumpkins 6 or 7 weeks ago, and the first pumpkins I have here have no markings. So I know that they have been sitting on the counter and they're ready to can. I do like to let them sit for at least 2 weeks, up to a month before I process them. If you don't get to them for 3 or 4 months, they should be fine, provided they are in a cool, dry environment. I will go ahead and process mine within 2 months. I just don't want to take the chance of the bottom starting to rot out or just starting to dry up. I have noticed that if you let them sit too long, they kind of get dry and stringy on the inside. So I'm going to process all the ones that I know were harvested in June. And that's quite a few here. Remember, if they have no marking, then they were in my first harvest. I've got quite a few here marked July. There's this June. So I'm going to separate those out and let them just continue to dry a little bit more. I have one here with a check mark. That means that the seeds inside here are the ones I want to keep for the next time I plant Seminole pumpkins. I went through a process to make sure that there was no cross-pollination with anything else that could be in my garden or in the neighborhood. So if you want to learn how to do that, I will provide a link in the description, and I'm going to try my best to remember to put the link at the end of the video so you can click through to see that one. So I'm going to do this one first, set the seeds aside, and then I'm going to continue on with splitting these and scraping the insides out. So I'm going to put the seeds that I save in this bowl, and then all the rest, I'm going to put the strings and stuff in this one, and the seeds in this one. So I'm just going to position this knife right in the middle and give it a good whack. until it's split. And then the grapefruit spoon is to scrape all the insides out. When my husband was a little boy and they were carving jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, this stuff just grossed him out so much that even today he doesn't want to eat anything pumpkin. But I've convinced him pumpkin muffins and pumpkin bread is good. He won't be so adventurous as to eat a pumpkin pie. So this is the process I'm going to do with all these pumpkins, and just scrape this out. Now the reason I love this grapefruit spoon is I can go ahead and scrape out any of the strings that are in there. And now this one's ready to be baked. Okay, so that's good enough for now. I'm going to set those to the side and I will clean them more later on. So my routine is to just scrape the seeds out and get these pumpkins in the oven to bake. And while they're baking, then I'll clean the seeds. So I'm going to make delicious snacks out of the remaining seeds, and that I'm going to put in a different video. Well, I was only able to get 6 on the cookie sheets, so I put them face down, and I like to use parchment paper just because it makes cleanup so much easier. Slide them into the oven. You don't have to pierce them or anything, just cut them open, scrape out the seeds and the strings and fiber, and then bake at 350. And I don't remember how long, but when I find out, I'll let you. So now it's been 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I feel very sure that these on top are ready. Those were really wet on the inside, so I didn't need the parchment paper for sure, but they're not like that every year, so sometimes they're kind of dry. These are not ready. That one is. I'm going to bring that out. The big ones are taking quite a bit longer, and I'm really surprised the ones on the bottom didn't get enough of the heat circulation to get them done, but they are the biggest ones. So 1 hour and 15, we're going to go for another 15. So the bigger ones can take 1 hour and 15 all the way up to 1.5 hours at 350. You can bake them at a higher rate, and it would help evaporate some of this extra water. And also you can, about halfway through, turn them over if they're really wet like this. It really doesn't matter to me how wet they are or how dry they are, because they're going to be canned, and then from there I'll use it in a recipe. Okay. Yep, that's good. At this point, you have 2 different ways that you can go with this. You can pack it right in the jars straight from the shell of this pumpkin. All you're going to do is scoop out the pumpkin and put it in your jar. Or you can put it in your processor so you can blend it up. I prefer to put it in my processor and blend it up, and that way it's ready for my recipe. I don't have any recipes where it's just chunks of pumpkin, and honestly, now that we baked them, they're not really going to be big chunks of pumpkin. So I'm going to start scooping out all the pumpkin that's inside. And it's okay that there's some strings in here. Just put them in here, and if your pumpkin is dry, you may have to add some water. Just try it and see if it'll process without the added water. I don't like my canned pumpkin to be too watery because then I have to adjust the recipe that I'm going to put it in. I like it to be the consistency of what you would get if you were to purchase a can of pumpkin. Cans of pumpkin are already pureed. Once you've pureed your pumpkin, then you have another choice to make. Do you want to just put plain puree in your cans or your jars, or do you want to go ahead and add your pumpkin pie spice or any other spices that you like with your pumpkin? I like to add plain because I like to adjust the amount of spice according to whichever recipe that I'm going to use. I don't even add salt. Salt is not what is going to preserve your pumpkin. The canning process will. So at this point, I don't know how many jars I'm going to fill. If I'm only going to fill 4 or 5, I'm not going to bring out my big canner. But if I've got 7 or 8 pints, then I'll bring out my big canner. So after I'm through processing all of this pumpkin here, I'll come back and let you know if I'm going to use a big canner or a small canner. Now I'm not going to add any water to that. That's kind of dry, but I'd rather it start out too dry than too wet. Let's pulse it a little bit. And now we're just going to turn it on. So I'm waiting until I see it make a vortex in the center. And all of this is smooth. There goes a seed. I can pick that out. Oh my, that's beautiful. Okay, so the jars were clean. I think there's probably about 3 jars in there. Let's see. This is always the tricky part. I'm not ready to take that out of there. I'm afraid it'll come out through the middle. Now, if you need any of this canning equipment, I will leave links in the description below. This little funnel is a lifesaver. You buy it once and you'll never have to buy it again. Whoop! Told you it was tricky. Put that over here. Okay, so found a seed. Goes right there. So it's looking like I'm gonna have about 6 pints today. This is actually a little bit more liquidy, just a tad more liquid than what you would have for a canned pumpkin, but it will work just fine. If you're making a pie with it, you might want to cut back on the milk or add an extra egg. But this is fine. It's always worked well. You just when you're adjusting your recipe, if your pumpkin is, too wet, then just cut back on either the liquid or the egg. Do you see these bubbles here? We don't want that, so I'm going to stir around the edge, stir it a little bit, because the bubbles will expand and it could end up breaking your jar or causing the seal not to take. So I'm going to stir that a little bit. They say not to use a metal knife. Well, I do. I'm just careful, But if you're more comfortable using something plastic or wooden, that's fine. So now I'm going to add the lid, add the rings. Don't wrench it tight, just finger tight. In my case, wrist tight, because the old lady's getting arthritis in the wrist. And if that's all the wrist can take, that's good enough. All right, I'm going to set those aside and get started on these. Well, I had to bring out the big guy. Look at all this pumpkin. If I forgot to mention, I like the pint size because it equals a can. When you buy a can of pumpkin in the grocery store, this substitutes. It's perfect. So I'm putting the rubber gasket in. I do have a rack in the bottom. And this canner has a rocker on the top. I use 10 pounds of pressure. I am at sea level. So if you are not at sea level, you'll want to adjust. And I've only been at sea level, so I can't advise you on that. So do your research. Let's see how many of these I can get in. Don't think I can get them all in. Maybe. Now, there are some canners that are double deckers. This is the biggest canner I have. Yeah, that's it. So what I'm going to do with this extra one is I'm going to make something pumpkin this weekend. Either pumpkin muffins or pumpkin bread. Yummy. I'm adding water. I like it to be about halfway up the jars. And since it's cool pumpkin, I add cool water. When I remember, I like to add just a little splash of vinegar because I have hard water and it just clouds up the outside of the jars. It's just a little extra, it's not essential. So then I'm going to fit this over the top. Add my rocker. Turn the big burner on high. And then I'm going to wait for this to jiggle. And at that point, I'm going to start counting. Okay, it's been 85 minutes. And all I'm going to do is turn the heat off. If I'm strong enough, I'm going to gently slide it because I don't want to scratch my stove and get it off the heat. It is going to take at least 2 hours, maybe 3 hours for this to come down naturally. And by that I mean, don't try to hurry this process along. It needs to cool down naturally. And by all means, don't try to open it. You will definitely be seriously burned. Canning pumpkins is a long process, but there's lots of times where there's a break. You can start dinner. You can clean up the kitchen that became such a mess while you're processing the pumpkin. Maybe you can go read a book. Maybe you can take a nap. Maybe you can take just a moment to give it a green thumbs up and subscribe Turn on all your bell notifications because I post videos just about every week, and it's mostly about organic gardening. Thanks for watching.
Great is